What if I told you that the most seductive words have nothing to do with cheap romance or catchy lines? What if, in truth, they were a disguised cry for freedom? There is something few people say, but you need to hear it. He won't think of you because you pleased him. He will think of you because, for an instant, you made time stop. Because you said something unpracticed, unexpected, uncomfortable. You said something that disarmed him. And that something can start with 3 words, but not the words you imagine. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote that man is the being whose existence precedes his essence. That means you don't have a ready-made identity waiting to be discovered. You make yourself with every choice, every word, every gesture. And so, when you speak from an authentic place, you leave a mark. You echo. You make the other person think of you all day, not as an obsession, but as a puzzle. So forget seduction as performance. Let's talk about presence, real impact, language that cuts through. The first word is simple, but carries a revolution. I choose. It seems banal, but how many times a day do you say, I have to, I need to, I can't? And when was the last time you firmly said, I choose? Sartre said, we are condemned to be free. It's not a compliment. It's a sentence. Condemned. Because there's no escaping this freedom, which is both a burden and a power. Saying, I choose, is an act of existence. It's to assert that, even facing circumstances, you still have room to act. You can still decide how you position yourself. You can still say yes or no and pay the price for it. Think of 2 women. The first says, he didn't call me because I wasn't interesting enough. The second says, he didn't call me, and I choose not to chase him. The first makes herself an object. The second makes herself a subject. The first waits to be chosen. The second chooses herself. Now imagine a conversation. You face him. He provokes you, perhaps tests your limits. And you, without shouting, without drama, simply look him in the eye and say, I choose to be here, but I can choose not to be. In that moment, it's no longer about conquest. It's about freedom. And freedom, when spoken calmly, has the power to both frighten and enchant. Because it doesn't depend. It does not bow. I choose to remain silent. I choose not to answer now. I choose not to explain what you already understand. These sentences aren't defenses. They're affirmations, reminders that you are not for sale. You're a work in progress. Saying, I choose, places you at the center of your own narrative. It reminds the other that you have direction, that you're not lost, waiting for a destiny. You are the destiny, and that's what stays in the mind of someone who truly sees you. Not your clothes, not your tone of voice, but the strength of someone who does not let herself be carried, who leads. Pause. Breathe. Look at your life now. How many times have you betrayed yourself by saying, I had no choice? How many times have you hidden behind invented obligations, inherited roles, polished excuses? What if today you began to say, even if only to yourself, I choose to continue, I choose to stop, I choose to be me. This is the first key, and it's not a key to make him think of you. It's a key for you to think of yourself, with clarity, and that is exactly what makes your presence unforgettable. The second word is, I feel. 3 letters that disarm more than any argument. When you say I feel, something in the room changes, because the everyday game is to protect oneself, to feign control, to rationalize everything. But feeling is the most human gesture there is, and at the same time, the most subversive. In a world that values performance, saying I feel fear, I feel longing, I feel anger is like turning on a light in a dark room. Sartre spoke of bad faith, that mechanism we use to deny our freedom, pretending we are only a function, a role, a robot. And feeling breaks that, because no one feels by obligation. Feeling is existence in the raw. Now imagine, you're in a difficult conversation, and instead of attacking or staying silent, you say, I feel that you've pulled away, and that confuses me. You're not begging. You're revealing yourself. You're saying, I am a being who feels, and I have no shame in that. This is not weakness. It's presence. Another scene. He asks why you disappeared, And you answer, without irony, without defense, because I felt I was fading away next to you. That sentence carries no attack, only truth, but a truth so naked that, if he's awake, he will hear it echo for days. If he's not, he doesn't deserve to be near someone who feels with courage. I feel that this conversation is swallowing me. I feel that I'm trying too hard. I feel that I want something different. These sentences don't ask permission. They open space. And space is what relationships dominated by fear and conventions lack the most. Sartre said, "Emotion is a way to transcend the situation, that is, to escape the world's rigidity. When you feel, you create a fissure in the system. You remind the other that everything is fluid, that nothing is guaranteed, that being with someone is a renewed choice, not a contract. But beware, saying 'I feel' is not doing drama. It's making contact. It's looking inward, finding something that throbs, and offering it to the other, unadorned, unmasked. And that leaves a mark. Because it's rare. Because it's true. Pause. Think of the last times you stayed silent so as not to bother. That you forced a smile to keep the peace. That you held back tears for fear of seeming fragile. What if, at that moment, you had said, 'I feel that I'm leaving inside'? Perhaps he would have been startled. Perhaps he would have woken up. Or perhaps he would have left. But in all cases, you would have remained whole. Saying, 'I feel' is an act of presence. And true presence is unforgettable. It stays on the skin. Even when the other tries to move on, it remains as a question, as doubt, as a seed. Because deep down, what binds us is not what the other did. It's what he made us feel. Few people understand the power of saying, 'I am not.' That's because most are desperately trying to be desired, to be enough, to be what the other expects. But Sartre already warned, living, trying to match a predetermined essence, is living in bad faith. It's being an object. And the only way to escape that is to claim the negative. I am not what you think. Imagine. Someone compliments you but reduces you. They say you're calm, that you don't complain, that you're easy to deal with. It sounds like praise, but it's disguised shrinkage. And you, in a firm voice, reply, "I am not only that." At that moment, something breaks. The other loses control, because now you're unpredictable. You no longer fit the comfortable box he created. I am not just who you met at the beginning. I am not the version you imagined. I am not your emotional guarantee. These sentences are not negative. They're liberating. They shatter the fantasy of completeness, predictability, possession. They give back to the other the weight of freedom. And as Sartre said, that can cause nausea. Because seeing the other as an absolute, irreducible, free being is anguishing, but also fascinating. Saying, "I am not," is a way to open space for what you are becoming. Because no one is just one thing. You change. You contradict yourself. And that is exactly why you are real. That is why thinking of you is not simple. It's complex, restless, alive. Now, imagine a random date. He says, "You seem different." And you reply, "I am. Because I am not fixed. I transform." That's not arrogance. It's a statement. A way to remind that being with you is accepting movement, or not being. Think how it would be if, instead of trying to fit the mold, you freed yourself from it. Instead of justifying every change, you assumed, "I am no longer the same, and that's good." Instead of apologizing for not meeting expectations, you affirmed, "I am not what you projected." That denial doesn't push away. It reveals. Because whoever hears it realizes, here is someone who does not fake, who does not reduce herself, who is not trying to please, but to exist. And that, however unsettling, attracts. Because deep down, we all want someone who challenges us to be more than a reflection. I am not the perfect woman. I am not the easy answer. I am not the story that ends well, but the one that begins with truth. These sentences are not walls. They are portals. They demand a decision from the other. Will you stay and walk together with the mystery, or will you look for a more comfortable role? Either way, you've already won. Because whoever dares to say, "I am not," no longer depends on the other's desire to feel alive. Have you noticed that some silences are louder than any speech? That there are people who, even far away, still occupy space inside us? Absence has weight, but not just any absence, rather the one born from choice, from the conscious act of leaving, not as punishment, but as the consequence of self-respect. Sartre said that man is always beyond what he is, that we are transcendence. That means every gesture of yours carries a project. Even your absence says something. And when it is authentic, when you step away because being present would betray yourself, that absence becomes an inverted presence. You're not here, but you're everywhere. Think of the times you wanted to reply to a message just not to seem cold, when you wanted to keep contact just not to bother, when you smiled while withering inside. Now think if, instead, you had allowed yourself to vanish, not as a game, but as a statement. Being here this way diminishes me, and I choose not to diminish myself. He may not understand at first. He may think you lost interest, that you're confused, that you overreacted. But over time, if he's even minimally honest with himself, he'll realize you didn't flee, you protected yourself. And that, for someone used to relationships based on fear, is shocking. Because the silence of someone whole is worth more than 1,000 words from someone lost. Not replying can be an answer. Not insisting can be a scream. Not justifying yourself can be an act of self-love so violent that it disorients whoever sees it. Because now he must ask himself, what did I do for her to feel it was better to go? And even if he never says it aloud, the question lingers. It is in that lucid absence that you plant the deepest doubt. She doesn't need me. She chooses herself. She owes me no explanations. And that, this freedom, unsettles, disturbs, attracts. Because you withdrew with dignity. Because you didn't ask to be seen. You withdrew when you weren't. Remember, being present every moment can be a form of desperation, a fear of being forgotten. But knowing when to go, and going with truth, is a sign of maturity. And more, it's a silent reminder that you're not available for scraps, that you're a work in process, and whoever wants to accompany you must learn to respect your silences as much as your words. Sartre would say that every absence is presence in another form. So when you vanish because you don't want to lose yourself, you're actually becoming even more present, in thought, memory, the other's restlessness. Sartre called bad faith the habit of lying to oneself, hiding behind roles, routines, and excuses to avoid facing the brutal freedom that is to exist. And in the game of relationships, that bad faith appears in its most subtle and destructive form, when you perform. Have you ever said, "I'm fine," when you were shattered? Laughed at a lame joke just so you wouldn't seem strange? Said, "Of course I understand," while inside you screamed? That's not politeness. It's existential betrayal. The problem with performing is that you dissolve yourself. And the more you dissolve, the harder you are to remember. Because what stays in someone's mind is not the person who fits in, but the one who confronts, the one who shows who she is, even when it unsettles. Imagine a woman who, upon realizing she's being treated as a backup, doesn't beg, doesn't make a scene. She simply says, "I'm not here to fill a void, I'm here to live fully," and stands up. That woman is not forgotten, because she breaks the script. Performing is believing that being yourself is too risky, that showing yourself is dangerous, and indeed it is, because freedom always demands a price, not being loved by everyone. But the question is, do you prefer to be loved for what you pretend to be, or respected for who you truly are? Sartre said that denying freedom is a way to avoid it. And when you say, "That's just how I am," just to justify a role that confines you, you are fleeing. When you say, "I have no choice, I depend on him," you forget that there's always a choice, even if painful, even if lonely. It's easier to be the nice one, the available one, the one who understands everything. But that has a cost. Little by little, you vanish from yourself. And worse, you start attracting people who only know how to relate to masks, not to souls. Breaking bad faith requires small acts of courage, saying, "I don't want that. That bothers me. I'm not okay. I need time," and more. It requires bearing the discomfort of being seen as you really are, unedited, without emotional makeup, without pose. Pause. Look at your life now. In which areas are you still acting? In which relationships do you say what they want to hear, not what you really feel? And what if tomorrow you decided to stop pleasing? What would change? Who would leave? Who would stay? There's no ready answer, but one certainty. Whoever remains after the performance falls, that one is worth the risk. Sartre distinguishes two modes of being in itself and being for itself. Being in itself is like a stone, an object, what just is. Being for itself is consciousness, project, transformation. The problem is that, in relationships, many treat others as if they were objects, waiting to be defined, desired, validated, as if existence depended on the other's gaze. But you weren't made to fit a mold. You are project, and that means you are always becoming, always under construction, and it's that living construction that fascinates, because what is fixed bores, what is mutable intrigues. Think of a woman who's a work in progress. She studies, reinvents herself, makes mistakes, changes her mind, experiments. She doesn't need to explain her phases, nor apologize for her transformations. She isn't a manufactured enigma. She's a natural mystery, and that's why she leaves a trail. Because there's no way to understand her once and for all. And whoever tries, stays. You don't have to be consistent with a past version of yourself. That's a prison. Who said you can't be light today and deep tomorrow? That you can't want solitude one week and company the next? That's not contradiction. It's existence. What makes you unforgettable is not what you deliver ready-made, but what you reveal in layers. A book that ends on the first page holds no one, but a being who reveals themselves little by little, who changes, who confronts, who transcends. That being remains in memory as a question still unanswered. Being a project means you don't need to prove yourself. You just need to exist in motion, and whoever has eyes to see will keep seeing you even from afar. The last word, which doesn't need to be said but is felt in every gesture, is, I don't need. And what comes next is even more powerful. But I choose. Because when someone realizes that you're not there out of lack, out of fear of solitude, out of necessity, but out of free choice, something within that person disassembles. Sartre wrote that desire is the project of appropriating the other's being, but full freedom breaks that project. When you show you could be anywhere, with anyone, even alone, but choose to be there, in that moment, not out of habit, not out of illusion, but out of presence, you become an enigma. You become full presence. You become real. Imagine a simple scene. You receive a message from someone who hurt you. He wants to reconnect. You read it, breathe, and respond. I don't hate you, but I don't choose to return. Is it cold? No. It's mature. It's free. Because there's neither hate nor dependence. There's clarity. Or he asks why you're so calm, and you reply, because I don't depend on what comes from outside to be at peace. That is the deepest form of transcendence, existing with your feet on the ground, but with your soul untied. This doesn't mean coldness. It means fullness. It means you don't love out of lack, but out of abundance. That you're not there waiting to be chosen, but deciding to choose, with clarity, with boundaries, with wholeness. I don't need you to love me to feel alive. I don't need you to stay to remain whole. But if you stay, it will be because both choose, not because one depends on the other. That is the freedom that frightens, that attracts, that marks. Because in a world where almost everything is disguised attachment, finding someone who loves lightly is like finding a mirror of what is possible. Sartre would say that authentic existence only begins when being for itself accepts the anguish of total freedom. And it's in that anguish that beauty dwells. Because when you allow yourself not to need, you allow yourself to love truly, without control, without manipulation, without guarantees. Do you want him to think of you all day? Then don't ask for it. Just live so intensely and truthfully that even when silence comes, he continues to hear your presence in the recesses of his consciousness. Because no one forgets someone who loved with freedom. Pause. Breathe. You've come this far. And now, the choice is yours. You heard 7 keys. 7 ways to exist with more truth. And 3 words that, when spoken authentically, don't seduce. They mark. Because there's nothing more memorable than someone who refuses to live halfway. I choose. I feel. I am not. These words don't work like a spell. They work like a mirror, and not everyone can handle the reflection. But whoever can, stays. You weren't made to please. You were made to choose, to feel, to break, to walk away when necessary, to stay when it's genuine, to say no, even while trembling inside, to stop performing, to become, not to be reduced. Maybe he will think of you, maybe not. That's secondary. What matters is that, from now on, you don't depend on that to remain who you are. Sartre said we are entirely responsible for everything we are. That's frightening, because there's no manual, no excuse, no ready-made path. But it also frees, because if everything is construction, then you can reconstruct, every day, with every gesture, with every word. So I invite you to a radical choice. Stop living as if you needed to be chosen, and start living as someone who has already chosen herself. Don't wait to be remembered. Become unforgettable by being real. And now, I leave you with a question that doesn't want a quick answer. It's just the beginning of something greater. Who are you being when no one is watching? Answer in the comments if you wish. But above all, answer for yourself. And if it's true, he will feel it. He will think of it. He will remember, even if he never says so.